And bad morning, everybody. Today is October 19, 2018. Thanks for being with us. This is episode 5 of Bad Morning News. And it's good to have you here this bad morning. I don't know how you all are doing this morning. I'm already having a bad morning, so I'm running a couple minutes late. Apologies for that. But yeah, this morning has begun very oddly. But in any event, thank you to our sponsor, Brave Browser. If you're tired of the typical corporations out there selling your data to the highest bidder, give Brave Browser a try. And thanks again to them for that. Thanks to Brave Browser for sponsoring the show. If you download their browser at brave.com/bad944, downloading at that link will benefit the show. So thanks to anyone considering doing that. And my name is Cryptic Cynic, aka CJ. I'm here with you this morning. I'd also like to mention that we are looking for new hosts for Bad Morning News. If you are interested in that, give us a shout out on Discord or in the comments. Here on YouTube, we'd love to have more hosts. And in any event, let's jump into some articles. Today's Friday. So it's the community episode of Bad Morning News, and that just means we will cover links suggested by people in Discord. If you share your links to community links in the community links section, we'll cover it. So this first one was submitted by Lupinit. This one is from Reason.com, written by Jacob Sullum. Trump slams very unfair drug sentences. The president's comments could improve the prospect for federal penal reform. Kanye West's literal embrace of Donald Trump was all over the news last week. The president's rhetorical embrace of criminal justice reform got considerably less attention but may prove more consequential. In an interview with Fox News on the morning of his meeting with the rap impresario, Trump signaled that he was ready to go beyond back-end reform, which focuses on rehabilitation of inmates, and support front-end reform, which focuses on reducing sentences and sending fewer people to prison. The key to understanding Trump's remarks is Alice Marie Johnson, whose sentence the president commuted in June at the behest of West's wife, Kim Kardashian. Johnson, a first-time offender who received a life sentence in 1996 for participating in a Memphis cocaine trafficking organization, has described herself as a telephone mule passing messages between the distributors and sellers. While serving nearly 22 years in federal prison, she became a grandmother and great-grandmother, an ordained minister, and a mentor to other inmates. Although it took the intercession of a fellow reality TV star for Trump to free Johnson, he clearly was impressed by her story. More important, he recognizes that Johnson, whom he calls the most incredible woman, is not unique in receiving an absurdly disproportionate sentence for a nonviolent crime. You have many people like Mrs. Johnson, Trump said on Fox News. There are people in jail for really long terms. Notably, Trump did not say the solution is more commutations, although those would certainly be welcome. There has to be a reform because it's very unfair right now, he said. It's very unfair to African Americans. It's very unfair to everybody. Trump had high praise for criminal justice reforms in Texas and Georgia, which in recent years have seen falling crime rates even as they reduced their prison populations. They have really done a tremendous job with reform, he said. These comments, which may seem surprising from a man who has consciously cultivated a tough-on-crime image, reflect the influence of people Trump respects, like his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, a supporter of the conservative reform organization Right on Crime, and yes, people like Kanye and Kim Kardashian. That influence could be crucial in the ongoing debate about federal sentencing reform. Last May, the House overwhelmingly approved the First Step Act, a collection of modest prison reforms aimed at reducing recidivism and promoting reintegration. The bill is on hold in the Senate, where Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley, our Iowa, is demanding that it include sentencing reforms as well. The latest proposal would incorporate into the First Step Act 4 elements of Grassley's Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act. The amendments would widen the safety valve that lets some drug offenders escape mandatory minimum sentences, narrow the criteria for mandatory minimums that apply to repeat drug offenders, clarify that escalating sentences for drug offenders who have guns require prior convictions, and retroactively apply the shorter crack cocaine sentences that Congress approved in 2010. If Trump backs the changes Grassley wants, an amended bill could be approved by the lame duck Congress after the election. I believe the president was sincere, says Jason Pai, vice president of legislative affairs at FreedomWorks, which supports sentencing reform. I was skeptical when the White House began dabbling in this more than a year ago, but the White House has been fully engaged on this. People do change their minds about these issues. Not long ago, Grassley himself was an ardent opponent of sentencing reform. In Trump's case, the evolutionary pressure may come from people he disdains as well as people he admires. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is no fan of sentencing reform, which may count in its favor as far as Trump is concerned. If Sessions does not get on board with prison reform, Trump said on Fox News, then he gets overruled by me because I make the decision. That's the end of that article. Definitely good news on the surface, and I certainly hope that this happens, that he's willing to take some steps to reduce the complete bullshit that the system is, throwing people in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. I'm sorry, but selling drugs is not a crime. Unless they're putting guns to people's heads and forcing them to do drugs, they should not be in jail as far as I'm concerned. And this is one of the worst injustices being served up by the so-called justice system at the current time. And as we know, the United States makes up 15% of the world population, but has 25% of the world's prisoners, which is really hideous. And, there's a lot of things at play here. As you can all probably guess, I am not faithful in any politician or government to follow through on promises or do good things, but obviously I hope it happens. A couple people have commented that Trump has at the same time come out pressing for more intense drug war, which would seem to contradict any attempt to reduce mass incarceration, really. So, make of that what you will. But I'll take, any positive step at this point. I mean, that's all we can really do. So if Kanye and Kim are somehow, influencing Trump to do this, then, good for them. I guess maybe he wants to talk to fellow TV stars, if that's his thing. Good for him. And, I guess even as the article says, this interview took place on Fox News. Even that alone might be helpful in convincing the viewers of Fox News to think about this issue, if nothing else. I would assume a lot of dedicated Fox News fans are likely not thinking about prison reform and whatnot. So, if anything else, hopefully they'll consider that. I'll check out some comments here and see if there's any. Danielle says, like yesterday's story, some common sense instead of scalps. For sure. And bad morning to you as well, Danielle. Always good to see you. This next article, let's see here. Okay, this one was also just in it. And this is from Zero Hedge. Clinton Foundation is charity fraud of epic proportions. Analyst charges in stunning takedown. In early May, we introduced readers to Charles Ortel, street analyst who on discrepancies at General Electric before its stock crashed in 2008, and whom the Sunday Times of London described as one of the finest analysts of financial statements on the planet in a 2009 story detailing the troubles at AIG. Having moved on beyond simple corporate fraud, Ortel spent the past year and a half digging into something more relevant to the question: the Clinton found records, federal and state level tax filings, and donor disclosures. 4 months ago, Ortel began releasing his preliminary findings in the first of a series of up to 40 planned reports on his website. His allegation was simple: this is a charity fraud. To Clinton Foundation, Ortel decided to take it apart and see how it worked, and he has been doing that ever since February 2015. I decided, as I did with GE, let's pick one that's complicated, said Ortel. Is complicated, but it's really very small compared to GE. When Ortel tried to match up the Clinton Foundation's tax filings with the disclosure reports from its major donors, he said he started to find problems. That includes records from the foundation's many offshoots, including the Clinton Health Access Initiative and the Clinton Global Initiative, as well as its foreign subsidiaries. I decided it would check what their donors thought they did when they donated to the Clinton Foundation, and that's when I got really irritated. Some of the major donors say they gave to the Clinton Foundation to do, and what the Clinton Foundation said, what they got from the donors, and what they did with it. As previously reported, last year the Clinton Foundation was forced to issue corrected tax filings for several years to correct donation errors, but Earl said many of the I'm against charity fraud. I think people in both parties are against charity fraud, and this is a charity fraud, he said. To be sure, Ortel's efforts were to be commended. Digging through the foundation's numbers cannot have been easy, considering that the nation's most influential charity watchdog put the Clinton Foundation on its watch list of problematic nonprofits in 2015. Furthermore, the Clinton family's mega charity took in more than 140 million in grants and pledges in 2013, but spent just 9 million on direct aid. That's because the organization spent the vast bulk of its windfall on administration salaries and bonuses, with the fattest payouts going to family friends. It seems like the Clinton Foundation operates as a slush fund for the Clintons, said Bill Allison, a senior fellow at the Sunlight Foundation, a government watchdog group where progressive Democrat and Fordham Law professor Zephyr Teachout was once an organizing director. Overnight on his released the long-awaited executive summary of his numerous and at times confusing findings. Beginning today and regularly thereafter, numerous detailed exhibits will examine the known public record of the Clinton Charity Network within the context of applicable state, federal, and foreign laws. And while we await the upcoming exhibits to his summary, here are the main highlights from the executive summary, which we urge all visitors who have even a passing interest in the effort that has consumed the Clintons' time and energy for the 2 decades and brought them substantial wealth to read. Executive summary: Understanding the Clinton Foundation Public Record in Proper Context, 1997 to present. To informed analysts, the Clinton Foundation appears to be a rogue charity that has neither been organized nor operated lawfully from inception in October 1997 To date, as you will grow to realize, it is a case study in international charity fraud of mammoth proportions. In particular, the Clinton Foundation has never been valid to pursue tax-exempt purposes other than as a presidential archive and research facility based in Little Rock, Arkansas. Moreover, its operations have never been controlled by independent trustees, and its financial results have never been properly audited by independent accountants. In contrast to this stark reality, Bill Clinton recently continued a long pattern of dissembling, likening himself to Robin Hood, and dismissing critics of his philanthropic post-presidency, despite mounting concerns over perceived conflicts of interest and irregularities. Normally, evaluating the efficacy of a charity objectively is performed looking closely into hard facts only, specifically determining whether monies spent upon program service expenditures have actually furthered the limited authorized tax-exempt purposes of entities such as the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, its subsidiaries, its joint ventures, and its affiliates, together the Clinton Charity Network. But popular former presidents of the United States retain bully pulpits from which they can certainly spin sweet-sounding themes to a general audience is not sufficiently acquainted with the strict laws and regulations that do in fact tether trustees of a tax-exempt organization to following only a mission that has been validly pre-approved by the IRS on the basis of a complete and truthful application. This executive summary carries forward a process of demonstrating that the Clinton Foundation illegally veered from its IRS-authorized mission within days of Bill Clinton's departure from the White House in January 2001, using publicly available information, which in certain cases has been purposefully omitted or obscured in disclosures offered through the Clinton Foundation website, its principal public portal. With the question of whether a federally authorized nonprofit corporation has been validly organized and operated is a question of fact, best answered through close review of the record. Without having access to helpful corroborative materials, including board minutes, donor solicitation, presentations, after-action reports to donors, management representation, letters to accountants, internal memoranda, and communications with key counterparties, this executive summary previews 40 detailed exhibits that dissect portions of the public record concerning activities of the Clinton Charity Network. Determined review of these 40 exhibits that deal primarily with the period 23 October 1997, when the Clinton Foundation was organized, through 2011, when attempts to reorganize the Clinton Foundation were most active, demonstrates beyond reasonable doubt that the Clinton Charity Network was neither organized nor operated lawfully. The IRS publication states clearly a nonprofit corporation must pass both an organizational test and an operational test to be legitimately exempt from federal income taxes. 1. IRC 501c3 requires an organization to be both organized and operated exclusively for one or more IRC 501c3 purposes. If the organization fails either the organizational test or the operational test, the organizational test concerns the organization's articles of organization or comparable governing document. The operational test concerns the organization's activities. A deficiency in an organization's governing document cannot be cured by the organization's actual operations. Likewise, an organization whose activities are not within the statute will not qualify for exemption by virtue of a well-written charter. the Clinton Foundation and each part of the Clinton Charity Network fails either the organizational test, the operational test, or both of these tests. The consequences for failing to meet either the organizational test or the operational test are severe. In normal circumstances, a charity would have its tax exempt status revoked retroactively. The charity would then have to refile its tax returns and pay corporate income taxes upon any profits earned from the date is revoked forward to the present. Donors who took tax deductions in the relevant time periods would owe personal income taxes on contributions they had made, and a raft of criminal as well as civil sanctions would likely ensue, whose financial consequences might or might not be mitigated by insurance. All right, let's see. Well, there's a lot more to this, and I encourage you all to read the entire article and this entire summary. But I think that gets across the main idea here, that someone is finally digging into the Clinton Foundation's records and surprise found that it's horribly, there's a lot of horrible discrepancies there in what they say they were going to do with the donated money and what they actually did. And this has been an issue for a few years now, and of course was dismissed by those supporters of the Clintons as nothing. But it looks like the proof is pretty much laid out here, and I'll post the link to this in Discord and in the description to this video following the show today. And yeah, I don't have too much to add about that, but it's pretty damning, it looks like, and something to follow and check out. Danielle says, actually, we are thinking about prison reform. LOL. And when are these clowns going to jail? That's what I'd like to know as well. Hopefully, this report will add fire to the push retribution, or well, I shouldn't say retribution, but to actually hold the Clintons accountable. Although we know typically people in the elite class like them hardly ever actually get anything. So we'll just have to wait and see. Comes from in community links. This one, Sarah Carter, SarahACarter.com, written by their staff. Breaking: Antifa attacks GOP headquarters in NYC, warns merely the beginning. Far-left activists associated with Antifa and other radical hate groups attacked the Republican Party headquarters in New York City late Thursday evening, vandalizing the historic building and warning the incident was merely the beginning. The New York GOP released shocking images immediately following the assault, writing the New York Republican New York City headquarters at the Metropolitan Republican Club was physically vandalized last evening with broken windows, spray paint, and more. The attackers left an ominous note at the scene, saying the U.S. government has established concentration camps around the country for Latino people, shamelessly murdering black people, and continues its war machine that has slaughtered Muslim people with impunity for decades. Our attack is merely a beginning. We are not passive, we are not civil, and we will not apologize. Those of good conscience and clear mind know this state of oppression cannot remain. The U.S. fascist political system is one of the most savage institutions in history, and we will combat it relentlessly until all are free of American barbarism, adds the note. And this occurred last week. I believe, last Thursday. And there's a picture of some of the spray paint, and apparently some of the doors have the anarchy symbol spray painted on them. And that's what I mostly dislike about the Antifa people. I think they are giving, anarchism a bad name and just making it seem like they're just partisans out there to damage property. Obviously, that's not what I would want people to believe it to be. And it's unfortunate that Antifas go around and, call themselves anarchists, when a lot of times they're mostly partisan and also mostly just communists and not really anarchists in a principled sense. And I don't see what breaking windows will do except turn people against them. So I mean, I agree with some of the things they said there, with the government just doing a lot of horrible things. I mean, I say that every day, but the solution isn't going to be vandalism. You don't want to just go around throwing shit through windows at offices where people could be inside. You'd be harming them, and they're not. Those people, even if they work for the Republican Party or whatever, those people aren't the ones who really are responsible for what the government is doing. So I this has been happening a lot recently with the Antifas just causing senseless, violence and property damage. And again, I think it just hurts those who do have principles and people who really are committed to trying and doing what they can to reduce the government's harm. And hopefully, this doesn't escalate more. But it's something we'll have to follow and see what ends up happening. I also wouldn't be totally surprised if there were provocateurs intentionally, um, intentionally trying to smear the name of people who do call themselves anarchists. That's happened in the past before. So, checking out comments here, Max says Antifa says no rulers unless we like them. In that case, we want super powerful rulers. Yeah, I agree. That's what Antifa seems to stand for, and overall they seem to support violence. I mean, if they're willing to use this type of violence, I'm sure they'd be willing to, have a centralized government that forcibly redistributes wealth, and that's what makes them not anarchist, in my opinion. Max says agent provocateurs for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be beyond the pale for people to deliberately just be provoking this, as I think has happened with some other of the leftist groups out there, like Black Lives Matter. Either some have said they've been getting outside funding from George Soros and other sources, deliberately trying to make the whole issue into a black versus white thing. When the cops killing people is equally a problem to anyone of any race or any skin color, and dividing it among racial lines just reduces the focus that needs to be on the police state as it is. And this next article comes from antiwar.com. This is written by Jason Ditz. U.S. opposes Korea's new no-fly zone plans. One of several agreements between the two Koreas designed to reduce military tensions. North and South Korea have agreed to establish a no-fly zone along their mutual border. This is intended to prevent misunderstandings along the frontier. As with anything that might be seen as reducing tensions with North Korea, the State Department has come out against the idea, saying the U.S. believes the no-fly zone will undermine military readiness. The real problem isn't readiness as the real problem isn't readiness, it's the Trump administration's ability to carry out threatening military maneuvers along the border between North and South Korea. During tense periods, the US has often conducted such overflights with nuclear capable warplanes. As with the US desire to keep stepping up sanctions, they are loath to lose any of their capability to casually threaten North Korea in the process of diplomatic progress. This means opposing South Korea's no fly zone deal. And there's a second add on to this. Trump administration bans U.S. aid groups from North Korea. While the Trump administration has long maintained that sanctions against North Korea don't impact humanitarian aid, in practice, the administration has banned all American aid groups from the country, shutting down aid efforts. This comes as the administration looks to increase sanctions against North Korea and to make sure that growing diplomatic progress between them and the rest of the world doesn't end up easing their isolation. That means cutting humanitarian projects. The State Department said that there are a range of factors behind the decision to ban all of these aid groups from North Korea, and that officially they're being handled on a case by case basis. All U.S. groups involved in such a project, however, are getting the same answer, rejecting their travel. Aid groups are Aid groups also reported confusion at the Treasury Department about the regulation and licensing of NGOs that had worked with North Korea's government, including on aid projects. Cutting through the red tape is all but impossible at this point. And this article is also by Jason Ditz. And yeah, I think, although Trump did, put himself out there and met with Kim Jong Un, it looks like the State Department at this point is really getting in the way of a lot of attempts between North and South Korea to really move forward at this point. And I don't know if Trump is directly behind that, or if he'd say that his some of his administration or his people in the State Department are are the ones driving this. But I think unfortunately there is some truth to the idea that the U.S. or at least some elements within the State Department and the Defense Department would hate to let go of a foothold where they have made money for decades upon decades, as we know, with the militarization of the border and all the troops stationed in South Korea. It's kind of like an addiction at this point. They just don't. I don't think a lot of elements in the military-industrial complex are able to let go. I mean, they've just been used to something for so long. I think it'll take time and a lot of prodding and actual change to really get them to be willing to let go and move on. As It may be Ron Paul who said this, but the U.S. has pretty much never left any place it's gone to. I mean, Korea, Japan, Germany, all these places the military is gone. Continues to have U.S. military stationed there and all around in those regions, and I think it would just be a difficult move at this point. But that's how the status quo is. It's always difficult to make change. Max says anyone that says sanctions don't impact humanitarian aid doesn't understand economics or is lying. And I think that sums it up well. Of course, sanctions always hurt the poor, innocent people, and not necessarily their leadership. I mean, I don't think Kim Jong Un is going to be suffering or starving anytime soon, regardless of the sanctions. It's always the people who suffer when it comes to sanctions. With that, I'll cover this article that I came across in my local news. This one is one that gets under my skin a lot, but this is from Cairo7.com, written by Essex Porter. Gun Safety Initiative supporters launch final push as ballots go out. Seattle supporters of Gun Safety Initiative 1639 rallied today because ballots will arrive in voters' mailboxes as early as tomorrow. Their special guest was former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was nearly killed by gun violence in January 2011. Do you have the courage to fight? Stand with me, vote, 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 Giffords said. If passed, the initiative would raise the age to buy semi-automatic rifles from 18 to 21, the same as pistols. It would require enhanced background checks and safe storage of weapons. Paul Kramer is the citizen sponsor. His son was nearly killed in July 2016 when he was shot by a 19-year-old who had just legally purchased an AR-15. If Initiative 1639 had been in place then, he would not have been able to purchase that semi-automatic assault rifle. My son likely would have been spared unimaginable pain and grief, Kramer said, but four major Washington law enforcement associations representing thousands of officers oppose I-1639. The Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs said Initiative 1639 contains provisions that are in clear violation of both state and federal individual constitutional rights, which, as law enforcement officers, we are sworn to uphold. Giffords' husband, former astronaut Mark Kelly, travels the country with her promoting tighter gun controls. We often see with law enforcement that they, range the spectrum on this issue. Often rank and file cops can line up behind the National Rifle Association. Same is true with sheriffs who must win an election and who are often rural, Kelly said. A cross-cut Elway poll shows that I-1639 has nearly 60% support as the campaign goes into its final weeks. And it's the end of that article. And if all of you don't know, Washington State is a completely vote by ballot state where they all send out ballots and everyone votes absentee essentially. Without having to sign up as absentee, everyone gets a ballot in the mail and they send it in or drop it off in some in ballot collection areas like near libraries and stuff like that. Yeah, so this is, I don't know, this surprised me just seeing it yesterday. It surprises me when you have law enforcement groups who are who have a better understanding of the Constitution and individual rights than the voting public in this case. It's pretty. It's an interesting day when I'm in closer agreement with the cops than with these voters or whoever. But yeah, I'm sorry. This guy who lost his son almost was killed. It's sad to hear that, but he wasn't killed because people have the right to own guns. He was killed because someone took the action of shooting his son, which is already illegal, and making it illegal to purchase certain weapons is not going to save people from being shot. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. So, and same goes for Gabby Giffords, and I remember watching her whole thing back in 2011, back when I still watched the MSNBC and other cable news 24/7. I remember watching that whole thing unfold, and at the time, of course, it quickly became another launching point for gun control. But again, it was some guy who chose to do this. It's, it has nothing to do with the existence of guns or people's ability to purchase guns. As we know, where there's a will, there's a way. If you make it illegal to buy semi-automatic weapons, there will always be a black market for it, because people in America, especially, believe in their rights to self-defense, and they will want guns. And you'll just be making criminals out of more people who are not doing anything wrong. And again, I question, the mindset of these liberals who think they believe in individual freedoms and civil liberties, and are against mass incarceration, yet they support laws that would criminalize people simply for choosing how they defend themselves. And this initiative is very far reaching, and I'm sure if it does pass, which it probably will, because Washington is full of just typical leftists who have no ideological consistency whatsoever. But I'm sure it'll be immediately challenged in the courts because it is very far reaching. Not only does it want to change the age requirement, but it wants to force any gun owner to have a gun safe. So somehow you'll be made a criminal if you don't go out and purchase a gun safe to keep your guns in, and whatever. So I don't know. It's really ridiculous. But again, as I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see this pass. They just had another initiative passed a few years ago that supposedly closed the gun show loophole, as they like to call it. And this is just the latest reactionary measure of, hey, let's raise the age to 21, as if that will do anything. I mean, as if age limits do anything with regard to alcohol or tobacco. I don't know. I'm just going to stop before I begin ranting forever. I'll check out comments here. Daniel says, that's weird, so no need to prove you are eligible to vote at all. Yikes. Yeah, I don't know if they... I mean, they still register. I don't know what the process is. But yeah. In any event, I'll move on to this next article here. This one is from Activist Post. This article is written by B.N. Frank. Kentucky AARP and Attorney General say utility smart meters are too expensive and unnecessary. Kentuckians don't want them because of that and more. Citizens, elected officials, consumer rights and environmental organizations, and people all over the world don't want utility smart meters installed on their homes and throughout their communities for a variety of reasons. 1, they can cause fires and explosions. 2, they can cause appliances to malfunction and break. 3, they can make people and animals sick due to their RF emissions. 4, they are notorious for measurement errors and inflating customer bills. 5, they violate our right to privacy. 6, they have to be replaced frequently and costs are often passed on to the customers. Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear isn't the first AG to oppose utility smart meters being installed in his state. AARP Kentucky and other Kentuckians are right there with him. AARP calls on Public Service Commission to reject smart meters. Kentucky Utilities Company in Louisville, Gas and Electric Company, seeks permission from the Kentucky Public Service Commission to install some 1.3 million smart meters over the next 4 years on behalf of its 470,000 members in Kentucky. AARP's Kentucky Public Comments ask the Public Service Commission to reject the proposed smart meter request by KU-LG&E case 2018 00005. AARP appreciates this opportunity to comment on the latest proposal of Louisville Gas and Electric and Kentucky Utilities for certificates of public convenience and necessity for deployment of advanced metering systems LG and EKU have asked to install smart meters throughout their systems. AARP believes that a smart meter rollout is not needed. It costs too much. As the Attorney General's expert witness shows, the costs of the proposed rollout exceed the benefits. Too many Kentucky customers are already having trouble paying for electricity and natural gas service. The utilities want customers to pay to retire the meters now in service. There is no need to add costs to retire these meters prematurely. Further, AARP believes there is no need to rush this investment. Today, 25% of customers already have a smart meter. The utilities can continue the slow rollout, retiring existing meters without charging customers extra and moderating the pace of rate increases. The PSC just rejected the proposal in an earlier 2017 rate case. Nothing has changed since then to make a universal rollout any more sensible, and if the utilities are sure they are offering a program with benefits exceeding costs, they can refile the proposal in their upcoming case this fall. At least then it can be reviewed in the context of other burdens on customers and possible uses of the investment. The bottom line, AARP asks the Commission to reject the smart meter proposal. We can't afford it and it's not needed. KU, LG&E customers have 3 options to submit their comments to the Kentucky Public Service Commission. Written comments will be accepted through the conclusion of the evidentiary hearing. And they give an address for people to contact about this. And, you know, the smart meter issue is one. Let's see. Actually, let's see if there's any more written here. Yeah, okay, so that's the gist of the article. I don't. There's been a lot of talk about smart meters in a lot of in certain circles because they potentially do spy on people, and that's something that's not widely known. A lot of these companies have started rolling out these new smart meters all over the country, and there's been a lot of pushback from people who know that not only can it cost more, but also that it can be used to report on the people who live in the home. It can be used to report on your what you're doing. Basically, I mean, it can record when electricity is being used, when gas is being used, and there have been court cases that used information collected by smart meters, for example, to prove someone was at home or in a certain building because the smart meter is able to record and transmit that information. And there's a lot of concern about that among people who don't want to be tracked, because again, this is another example, just like we talk about a lot, of things that are supposedly convenient, new technology, but then it has this ability to potentially track you and be turned over to law enforcement. And some of the other issues mentioned here, they can cause fire and explosion, and they make people sick with RF emissions. And there are people out there who've said that they've become ill after having a smart meter installed on their home because it emits a lot more in the way of radio frequency than the traditional meters did. So this is something to follow, and I definitely hope that people are able to successfully push back against this if they don't want it. And it becomes an issue in areas where there's a monopoly by certain companies, and they when they say, yeah, we're just going to roll this out to everyone, it's very hard to push back against it. There's a really good video by TruthStream Media, and they personally went through this issue trying to have a smart meter, trying not to have one installed, and the company actually they actually went through this really long process of trying to avoid it, and lots of money involved, uh, where companies just really try to pressure people into getting them, even though the existing ones are still working fine. So, just an issue to bring up there. I encourage you to all look into this for yourselves, if you're interested in that. And next article for today. This comes from the Free Thought Project. And this is around about the journalist potentially being murdered in the Turkish embassy a few weeks ago. This article is entitled "Cleaning Up Loose Ends: Khashoggi Murder Suspect Dies in Suspicious Car Accident." A member of the 15-man team suspected in the disappearance of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi has died in a mysterious accident, according to Turkish media. A 31-year-old lieutenant in the Saudi Royal Air Force participated in the killing of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi died in a suspicious car accident in Riyadh, according to Turkish media. Mashal Saad al-Bostani was reportedly on a 15-man hit squad dispatched to Saudi Arabia's Istanbul consulate in Turkey on October 2nd during Khashoggi's visit, before the team quickly left the country, according to Daily Yeni Shafak. Al-Bastani entered Turkey at 1:45 a.m. local time. He stayed at the Wyndham Grand Hotel and left the country at 9:46 local time, 9:46 p.m. local time, on a private jet which belonged to the Sky. Bostani's alleged role in the murder of Saudi journalist are unclear, as are details of the traffic accident in Riyadh, prompting accusations of a cover-up by those who orchestrated the Khashoggi hit. Meanwhile, a columnist for Turkey's daily Hurriyet wrote on Thursday that Mohammed al-Otaibi, Saudi Arabia's Istanbul consul general, will be the next execution. Turkish daily Yeni Shafak reported October 17 that al-Otaibi's voice could be heard in one of the recordings which Turkish authorities are believed to have of Khashoggi's interrogation at the consulate. According to the report, after al-Otaibi told the interrogators to, quote, "do it somewhere else outside or I will be in trouble," he was told to shut up if you want to live when you are back in Saudi Arabia. Al-Otaibi returned to Saudi Arabia on October 16 before his residence in Istanbul by police for more than 8 hours on October 17 and 18. Another suspect's photograph was released from security footage on October 18 by the newspaper Sabah, which reports that 47-year-old intelligence officer Maher Abdulaziz M. Mutreb, who previously served at Saudi Arabia's London embassy, landed in Istanbul at 3:38 a.m. on October 2 and went to his country's Istanbul consulate at 9:55 a.m. to Hurriyet. Hours after Khashoggi's arrival and disappearance, Mutreb left the consulate and visited the consul's residence at 4:53 p.m., left his hotel at 5:15 p.m., and arrived at the Ataturk airport for his return on a private jet at 5:58 p.m. Mutreb had traveled extensively with the Crown Prince, perhaps as a bodyguard, according to an October 16 report in the New York Times. Khashoggi, a U.S. resident and Washington Post columnist who was critical of the Saudi government, reportedly took 7 minutes to die, according to the Middle East Eye and the Wall Street Journal. But in what was probably the most gruesome details from the report, MEM reported that Dr. Salah Mohammed al-Tubaji, who was identified by the Times and other media outlets as an autopsy expert, whose presence cuts against Saudi's suggestions that the killing wasn't premeditated, started cutting Khashoggi's body into pieces while the journalist was unconscious but still breathing. Previously, Khashoggi had been knocked unconscious after being injected with a mysterious substance. Later, the New York Times reported that the hit squad cut off Khashoggi's fingers while he was still conscious during an interrogation where he was also beaten and tortured before being dragged into another room where they finished butchering him. According to the Wall Street Journal, voices on the tapes can be heard asking the Saudi consul to leave his office before the hit squad murdered Khashoggi. The consul al-Otaibi departed Turkey for Riyadh Tuesday afternoon after the Saudis, in a sudden reversal, denied Turkey's requests to search Otaibi's residence, saying his home was off limits to investigators. And that's the end of that update. As has been coming out over the past several days, a lot of different, stories, potentially really disturbing things, talking about this journalist's last minutes, apparently, according to some of these reports, being chopped to pieces or cut up while still alive. And now one of the accused potential suspects of who potentially aided in killing the writer has now died in a mysterious car crash. So, who knows what's going on. Just a really bizarre story. And overall, I would hope, if nothing else, that the U.S. does stop supporting Saudi Arabia. But even if it takes, this after, years of Saudi Arabia just causing mass famine in Yemen, apparently that wasn't enough to get attention from American people and from the government in considering even ending its support for Saudi Arabia. If nothing else, I hope that comes out of this. But I'm sure there'll be a lot more bizarre stories coming out about this coming up in the next few days and weeks. I don't think we've seen the end of this, so we'll just have to see how long this drags on. And I will check out the comments. Let's see. Danielle says, it seems like everything is spying on us. Sheesh. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's really troubling about it. There's really nowhere to hide anymore, if not your TV or obviously your phone, your laptop. There's now refrigerators, microwaves, range, stoves that are all potentially spying on us, and the information going to companies that I don't really trust to keep your privacy in check when it comes to requests from law enforcement and whatnot. And let's see. Daniel says, and the Saudis want us to believe they are civilized. Yeah, exactly. It's just a constant barrage of bizarreness. And, many years and decades have gone by with the U.S. Turning a blind eye to all of the crazy goings-on with Saudi Arabia, while claiming to be against, radical Islam. Saudi Arabia is probably the most repressive Islamic regime out there. So with that, I think that's a good place to end. I'm sorry for any background noise. There's just something going on outside my door. I don't know what people are doing out there. But in any case, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. Thanks to everyone for submitting links in community links today. Final note, to let us know if you're interested in becoming a host with Bad Morning News, give us a shout in the Discord or in the comments. We'd always love to have more hosts. And with that, have a bad morning, everyone, and have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. This has been episode 65 of Bad Morning News for October 18 or 19, pardon me. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Remember, screw the state, fuck the system. Have a bad morning, guys. See you next week.